My ex-husband stood in the courtroom 2 years ago and told the judge I was too unstable to raise our daughter. He had a psychiatric evaluation, 3 character witnesses from his country club, and a voice so steady and warm it could have sold you a house. I had a public defender who'd met me 40 minutes before the hearing started. I lost. He moved our daughter to Phoenix. I wasn't allowed within 100 yards of her school, her house, or any of her activities. I sent letters. He returned them unopened. I called the court-appointed guardian, filed motions, mailed birthday cards, wrapped in tissue paper and ribbon. I don't know if she ever saw a single one. For 2 years, I woke up every morning and imagined what my daughter looked like now, whether she still slept with the stuffed polar bear she'd named Socks, whether she'd started losing her baby teeth. Then, on a Tuesday in March, a Phoenix area code lit up my phone. I was having coffee at the counter. I was in my studio apartment in Nashville sorting through contact sheets from a weekend assignment, an outdoor portrait session I'd shot to keep my freelance photography business afloat. I almost didn't pick up. Miss Calloway? A woman's voice, professional and measured in the way only a medical person can manage. This is Dr. Keller. I'm calling from Phoenix Children's Hospital. I'm the attending physician in our pediatric hematology unit. Your daughter Ellie was admitted this morning. My daughter. 2 words. I hadn't been allowed to use them out loud in 24 months. What happened? I heard my own voice from somewhere outside my body. Ellie collapsed during recess at her school this morning. She presented with severe fatigue, bruising across her arms and torso, and an abnormally low red blood cell count. We're running a full bone marrow biopsy, but based on preliminary results, we strongly suspect aplastic anemia. Aplastic anemia. I knew enough to know it meant her bone marrow had stopped making blood cells. I knew enough to know it was serious. She needs me to come, I said. It wasn't a question. We'll need to test all potential bone marrow donors. That includes you. As her biological mother, you may be our strongest candidate, Miss Calloway. She paused. I understand the custody situation is complicated, but right now, your daughter needs every option on the table. I hung up and stared at the contact sheets spread across my kitchen table. I had a gallery submission due in 4 days. I had a client consultation scheduled for Thursday morning. I had $200 in my checking account and a 2017 Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it. I grabbed my keys. The drive from Nashville to Phoenix is 19 hours. I made it in 17. I don't remember most of it. Just rest, stop fluorescent lights and gas station coffee, and the way the landscape flattened into desert as I crossed into New Mexico, the sun rising somewhere over the state line in a color I would normally want to photograph. I didn't stop to photograph anything. Phoenix Children's Hospital was a tower of glass and pale stone. I found the hematology unit on the 5th floor. Dr. Keller met me at the nurse's station. A compact woman in her 50s with close-cropped natural hair and glasses that magnified her eyes slightly. She shook my hand and led me to a consultation room before I could ask for Ellie. She's been asking for you, Dr. Keller said. I wasn't prepared for that. I had to press my hand flat against the table to keep from collapsing into the chair. Dr. Keller explained it carefully. Aplastic anemia, bone marrow failure, the body turning against itself. Ellie's red cell count was critically low. Without a successful bone marrow transplant, the prognosis was poor. They needed to test potential donors immediately. We've already drawn blood from her father, Dr. Keller said, and something in her tone shifted. Just slightly, just enough that I noticed. We'll test you today, and if you have any siblings or first-degree relatives who'd be willing... Can I see her? Yes, but Miss Calloway... She paused. She may seem different than you remember. 2 years is a long time. Room 514 smelled like antiseptic and the faint sweetness of the apple juice box on the tray table. Ellie lay against a stack of pillows, her dark hair cut shorter than I remembered it, both arms threaded with IV lines. She was 9 years old and she looked small enough to be 6. I opened the door slowly. She turned her head. I saw it happen on her face. The flicker of recognition, the uncertainty, the way her eyes searched mine like she was trying to remember a word she'd forgotten. "Baby," I said softly, just that, one word. "Mama." Her voice was barely above a whisper, hoarse from 2 days of tests and procedures. I sat beside her and took her hand, the one without the IV, and I didn't say anything else for a long time. I couldn't. Then she said, "Daddy told me you didn't want me anymore. He said you chose your job." I kept my voice steady. I had to. "That is not true. I have wanted you every single day. Your father took you away from me, and the court believed him. But I have never stopped trying to come back to you." She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes filling. "I kept your picture," she said finally. "The one from the zoo. I hid it under my mattress so he wouldn't find it." I held it together long enough to hug her, then I let myself cry. My ex-husband arrived an hour later. He was 44 now, still lean and put together in the way of a man who cared very much about how he appeared. The country club tan, the expensive watch, the practiced ease of someone accustomed to being the most trusted person in any room. He was a pediatric dentist. Parents loved him. He had a framed photo in his waiting room of him reading to a child in the chair, both of them laughing. He walked into the family consultation room and looked at me like I was a stain. "You have no right to be here," he said. "There's a court order." "The court order doesn't supersede a medical emergency." Dr. Keller's voice was calm and very final. "Your daughter needs a bone marrow transplant. We test all viable donors. Her mother is a viable donor." "I'll donate," he said flatly. "Test me. I'm her father." "We already have your sample," Dr. Keller said. "We're also testing Ms. Calloway. If you have a legal concern about her presence here, I'd encourage you to consult with your attorney. My concern is Ellie." He was silent for a moment. Then he sat down in the chair across from me, crossed his arms, and looked at the wall. The blood draws took 20 minutes. Then it was just waiting. I sat with Ellie for most of the afternoon, holding her hand, reading to her from the magazine rack at the nurse's station because she'd asked me to, her eyes closing slowly while I read aloud an article about manatees in Florida. At some point she asked if I still had socks. I told her I'd kept him on my nightstand. She smiled with her eyes closed. At 6 in the evening, Dr. Keller asked me to come to her office alone. She was already seated when I came in. She had a tablet in her hand. Her expression was very still. "Miss Calloway, I need to tell you something, and I want to do it carefully." She turned the tablet toward me. "Standard HLA blood typing is our first step in donor compatibility. When we process a family group, we cross-reference blood types before running the more expensive genetic panel." I stared at the screen, rows of letters and numbers I couldn't read. "Ellie's blood type is AB negative," Dr. Keller said. "You're A positive. That's consistent. She could inherit the B from her father." She paused, "but her father's blood type on file is O positive." I heard the words. I understood them individually. I couldn't make them form a sentence that made sense. "Two O-positive parents cannot produce an AB-negative child," Dr. Keller said quietly. "It's biologically impossible." I ordered a full DNA paternity panel to confirm. The results came back an hour ago. She looked at me directly. "He is not Ellie's biological father." The room tilted. "That's not possible," I said. We were trying to get pregnant. We were together. I was on an IUD and it failed and..." I stopped. Something cold moved through me. The IUD. I had gone to my gynecologist for a routine check when I was 29. She'd told me the device had migrated. "Unusual, but it happened," she'd said. They'd removed it and placed a new one. I'd been told it was a minor procedural issue. 3 weeks later, I was pregnant. I had assumed the pregnancy happened in the window between the old device and the new one. I had never questioned it. "Miss Calloway," Dr. Keller said, watching me carefully, "is there any possibility that another man could be Ellie's biological father?" I thought about the months before I'd married him. I thought about the man I'd been with before. A landscape architect named Reese, someone I'd loved for 3 years before his firm relocated to Seattle and we fell apart at the seams. I thought about the last time I'd seen him. One dinner, one goodbye, 3 weeks before I found out I was pregnant. I hadn't spoken to Reese in 9 years. "Yes," I said. My voice came out very quiet. "There's someone. His name is Reese. He lives in Denver now." Dr. Keller nodded slowly. "If he's willing to be tested, and if he's Ellie's biological father, the odds of a compatible match are significantly higher than an unrelated donor. Time matters here." I walked to the window at the end of the corridor and called a number I had never deleted from my phone. He answered on the second ring. Marin, my name in his voice. I'd forgotten the way he said it, the slight rise at the end. Rise. I couldn't find any way to ease into it, so I didn't try. "I know it's been 9 years. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. But my daughter is in Phoenix Children's Hospital with bone marrow failure. The doctors ran blood typing and discovered that." My voice broke. I pressed my fist to my mouth. "There's a chance she might be yours. From the night we said goodbye. I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't know." Silence. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "What hospital?" he said. "Phoenix Children's, 5th floor, hematology." "I can be there by morning. No hesitation, no recrimination, just when and where." Rise. "Marin, stop, I'll be there." He arrived at 7:45 the next morning. I was in the family waiting area with terrible coffee when I saw him come through the elevator doors. He was 40 now, taller than I remembered somehow, or maybe just steadier, with the kind of quiet presence that takes years to build. He found me across the room and sat down and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the custody battle, the fabricated evaluation, the 2 years of silence. I told him about the IUD, about the timing, about what Dr. Keller had said. I told him I was sorry in a way that didn't come close to being enough. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he reached across the small table and squeezed my hand once. "What does she need from me right now?" "Blood draw, HLA testing." "Then, let's go." The compatibility results came back that afternoon. Reese was a 7 out of 10 HLA match, strong, better than any unrelated donor in the registry. Dr. Keller was cautiously, quietly optimistic. When Rice asked if he could meet Ellie, I looked at my daughter through the glass window of her room. Her small face turned toward the television, the stuffed polar bear sitting in the crook of her arm, and I nodded. He stood in the doorway, and she looked at him with her careful, measuring eyes. "Hi," he said. "My name is Reese. I'm going to help you feel better." She studied him for a long moment. "You have the same nose as me," she said. He looked at me. His eyes were red. The night before the transplant procedure, my attorney arrived. Her name was Henley, a family law attorney out of Phoenix who'd been recommended through a domestic abuse advocacy network. She was somewhere in her 60s, built like someone who had won a great many arguments, and she sat down at the table in my hotel room with a yellow legal pad and said, "Start from the beginning." I started from the beginning. She listened for 2 hours, interrupting only to ask specific, pointed questions. By the end, she had 4 pages of handwritten notes and an expression that told me she'd heard enough. "I've already been in contact with a forensic accountant," she said. "Before I called you, I ran your ex-husband's name through some basic financial searches. There's something you need to know. 2 years ago, 6 months after he'd won custody, he had established what he called the Ellie Calloway Wellness Fund. He'd told Ellie's school, their church community, his country club network, and his patients that Ellie had been diagnosed with a rare developmental disorder requiring intensive private therapeutic support. He showed people an evaluation letter signed by a behavioral specialist. The specialist's license had been suspended 18 months before that letter was written. People donated because they trusted him, because he was a pediatric dentist, because he was a grieving single father. The fund raised $230,000. Ellie did not have a developmental disorder. Not a single dollar of that money had gone toward any legitimate therapy or treatment. The forensic accountant had traced it to a home renovation, 2 international trips, and an investment account opened in his own name. While his daughter was getting sicker, while her bone marrow was quietly failing, and he was canceling pediatric appointments and telling school nurses she was just a dramatic kid, he was renovating his kitchen. I was very still while Henley explained this. I was thinking about what Ellie had said the day before. He told me I was fine. He said I was making it up for attention. 9 months of symptoms. He had dismissed every single one. "There's more," Henley said. She showed me the initial custody evaluation, the one that had declared me unfit. It had been authored by a psychologist with a history of ethical violations, a man who'd been the subject of 2 board complaints before the court case and had accepted payment for evaluations in at least 3 other custody disputes in ways that violated professional standards. My ex-husband had paid him $18,000. "The evaluation that took your daughter was purchased," Henley said. I already knew it. In the way you know something you can never prove. I had known it from the moment I sat in that courtroom and watched the judge read through a document describing a version of me I had never recognized. But knowing it and seeing it in black and white, the wire transfer, the receipt, the email between the 2 of them where my ex-husband had written, "Make sure the alcohol piece is airtight," was something else entirely. The bone marrow harvest took 3 hours. Reese was calm going in, calmer than I would have been. He gripped my hand once in the corridor and then let the nurses wheel him through the double doors. I sat in the waiting room with my sister, who had driven in from Albuquerque overnight, and we didn't say much. There wasn't much to say. Dr. Keller came out at noon. The harvest had gone perfectly. The cells were being prepared for infusion. Ellie was in surgery prep. At 2 o'clock, I watched my daughter's face through the observation window as the donor cells dripped through her IV line. She was asleep. She looked peaceful in a way she hadn't since I'd arrived. No more fear behind her eyes, no more of that careful smallness she'd been carrying like a weight. Henley filed the emergency custody petition the same afternoon. The family services investigator arrived at the hospital 2 days later to interview Ellie. The interview was conducted without me present, per protocol. I sat in the hallway for 40 minutes and memorized every ceiling tile. When she emerged, her expression was carefully neutral, in a way that told me it wasn't neutral at all. Ellie described a household where she was discouraged from asking about you, she said, where she was told consistently that you had made a choice to leave her because she wasn't worth staying for. She paused. She also described being told, multiple times, that if she told anyone she was tired or sick, it meant she was being dramatic like her mother. She said she stopped telling him when her legs hurt. I pressed my hands together in my lap. She stopped telling him, I repeated, for approximately 7 months. Bone marrow failure, 7 months of symptoms. A 9-year-old who had learned that asking for help made things worse. The investigator filed her report with the court the following morning. The hearing was 11 days after Ellie's transplant. By then, her cell counts had started climbing. Cautiously, incrementally, the new cells beginning their slow work. Dr. Keller used the word promising for the first time. In the courtroom, Henley was methodical and merciless. She presented the fraudulent wellness fund, the $230,000, the suspended behavioral specialist, the emails. She presented the purchased custody evaluation, the wire transfer, the ethics complaints, the pattern of paid reports this same psychologist had produced across 3 states. She presented 9 months of missed appointments and dismissed symptoms. She presented the investigator's report. His attorney argued that my ex-husband had acted out of love, that single fathers struggled, that the wellness fund had been a mismanagement of good intentions, not criminal fraud. Henley asked him, quietly, to explain the email where her client had written, "Make sure the alcohol piece is airtight." His attorney didn't have a response for that. But it was the IUD that finished it. Henley's investigator had pulled the medical records from my gynecologist's office from 9 years ago. The notation about the migrated device was there. But so was something else. A follow-up, internal note from the clinic manager, flagged but never escalated, documenting that a man identifying himself as my husband had called the clinic the week before my appointment and asked detailed questions about IUD placement, specifically about circumstances in which one might need to be removed. We weren't married then. We had been dating for 3 weeks. He had called himself my husband. The clinic had no recording of the call, but the internal note had a date stamp, and Henley had a phone record, pulled from subpoenaed communications, showing an outgoing call from his number to the clinic's main line on that exact date. He had arranged for the device to be discovered as migrated at my next routine appointment, leaving me unprotected during the window when he needed me to become pregnant. He had done it deliberately, so that I would be bound to him, so that I couldn't go back to Reese, so that I couldn't leave. He had looked at me as a problem to be solved and solved me. The judge, a woman in her 60s who had been on the family court bench for 22 years and had seen a great many things, removed her glasses when Henley finished. She was quiet for a long moment. "I've sat on this bench for more than 2 decades, she said. She was looking at him, not at me. I have seen parents who were genuinely struggling. I have seen parents who were genuinely harmful. And I have seen on rare occasions parents who were systematically calculating." She set her glasses down. "You fall into that 3rd category." Full legal and physical custody was awarded to me, effective immediately. He was removed from the courtroom. He would face criminal charges, fraud, child endangerment, the wellness fund theft. His dental license was flagged pending investigation. The country club photo was gone from his website by the end of the day. My sister, who had been watching his professional profiles from the hotel lobby on her phone, sent me a screenshot. I was in Ellie's hospital room when the judge's order came through on Henley's email. Ellie was sitting up in bed eating a container of mandarin oranges, her color slowly returning, her eyes brighter than they'd been in days. Reese was in the chair beside her. He'd been there most mornings, reading to her, asking her questions about what she liked, learning her the way you only get to learn someone if you're patient and you stay. I sat on the edge of her bed and told her she was coming home with me. She didn't say anything for a second. She looked at the mandarin orange in her hand. Then she looked at Reese. "Is he coming too?" she asked. Reese looked at me. "Whenever you want him to," I said. She looked back at the orange. "Okay," she said, like it was simple, like it was the easiest thing in the world. 6 months later, Ellie's cell counts were normal. Dr. Keller used the word remission and shook my hand with both of hers. Ellie had started 4th grade at a school 12 minutes from our apartment in Nashville, where she had already made 2 friends she talked about constantly and joined the after-school photography club, which she told me was entirely her own idea, though I had suggested it once. Reese drove down from Denver on weekends more often than not. He and Ellie had developed a ritual, Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, each of them picking one thing the other had to try. She had gotten him to eat a persimmon. He had gotten her to eat a radish. She found this deeply funny. I still had the contact sheets from that March afternoon when the phone rang. I never submitted the gallery shoot. I forgot about the client consultation entirely. At some point, both of those things stopped mattering. I used to think that losing that custody hearing was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. I used to lie awake cataloging what I should have done differently, a better attorney, more documentation, something. I blamed myself the way you do when the verdict feels like a referendum on who you are. But here is what I know now. He was always going to fight dirty. He was always going to find a weapon. The psychiatric evaluation, the wellness fund, the IUD, none of it was reactive. He had planned it. He had built his version of events piece by piece, carefully, long before I understood what was happening. You cannot outmaneuver someone who started moving before the game began. What ended him wasn't strategy. It was biology, a blood type that didn't add up, a fact that couldn't be coached or purchased or buried in paperwork. The truth had been sitting in Ellie's veins the entire time, waiting for the right question. I was having coffee at the counter. My daughter is 9 years old. She still sleeps with socks. She has started losing her back teeth and thinks the tooth fairy is probably a government program. She asks too many questions about how cameras work, and last month she used my wide-angle lens without asking and got a genuinely beautiful shot of the dog next door mid-leap, which I pretended to be annoyed about. Was having coffee at the counter. Some nights she still wakes up from bad dreams. She comes to find me and I make her warm milk with a little honey, which she insists is a baby thing, while drinking it in its entirety. She doesn't talk much about the years before. Occasionally she'll say something, a sentence starting with "Daddy used to," and then she'll stop, like she's deciding whether it's worth carrying. Most of the time, she sets it down. I try to follow her lead on that. We have time now. We don't have to rush. The morning after the custody order came through, I sat in the hospital parking garage for a few minutes before driving back to the hotel. It was 5 in the morning. The desert air was cold and very clear. There was no one else in the garage. I cried the way you can only cry when no one is watching. Not the tidy, dignified kind, but the ugly kind. The kind where you don't care what your face is doing. I cried for the 2 years I couldn't get back. For every returned letter, every unopened card, every night I'd imagined the size she'd grown to while I wasn't there to see it. For the little girl who had hidden my photograph under her mattress and said nothing about her aching legs for 7 months because she had learned that asking for help made things worse. Then I wiped my face on my sleeve, started the car, and drove back to the hotel. She was coming home with me. That was enough to start with. That was more than enough.